Journalism Center announces $3.7 million project to strengthen civil society communication. UN talks on Libya have been adjourned due to lack of consensus on who will lead. Ugandan experts are urging for reopening of borders amid coronavirus concerns. These and more coming on The World Today. Good evening, viewers. You're watching The World Today with me, Sahna Tunkara, and now to our news in detail. The Media Academy for Journalism and Communication, MAJAC, has unveiled a new communication program to enhance civil society advocacy. The Empowering Civil Society Advocacy Project is a $3.7 million training program funded by the Dennis Media Support. Mariama Cham has more.
The project, which will last for 6 months, was launched on Wednesday in Kanifing. It is expected to strengthen the communication activities of 16 civil society actors. MAJAC's managing director, Sang Mendy, told journalists at the launch that the project will equip CSOs with knowledge and skills in information sharing as the 2020 elections drew nearer.
The Gambia celebrated as the start of a new democracy after we put to an end 22 years of autocratic rule. But it's going to take us a long time to actually catch up where other countries are. Know it or not, the Gambia risks sliding back to the situation where people in power undermine the gains we have made by trying to suppress information. MAJAC and partners are coming up with this project to build the capacity of community-based organizations and civil society organizations to go out there and inform and better inform the citizens. This project we are launching here today, called Empowering Civil Society Advocates, ECSA, aims to empower civil society organizations by offering them communication and advocacy training. It is evident that without means to inform and engage citizen participation, it will be far-fetched to have informed society. And without an informed society, citizens wouldn't be in position to participate in the political discourse and taking informed decisions where it matters most.
While the project is tuition-free for civil society participants, the trainees are expected to meet certain criteria to get enrolled. Applicants must have at least 3 credits and a pass in English, and they will have to submit a commitment letter from their supervisors, one that affirms that once they are enrolled, they wouldn't miss classes for office field trips. MAJAC is the country's leading journalism training school. And Lamin Jahate, the program manager of the Gambia Press Union, said the impact of MAJAC is being felt in most of the media outlets in the country.
When the GPU started the process of establishing MAJAC about a decade ago, the mandate of MAJAC at the time was to make sure that to help the GPU to fulfill one of its key mandates, that is the professionalization of the Gambian media. But how do we professionalize the Gambian media? It's through capacity building, because you can only professionalize an industry if the players of that industry are professional, they are well trained. That is why the GPU established MAJAC. And over the years, we can see today the impact of MAJAC, it's fell across the Gambian media landscape. I'm not sure there is any credible major media outlet in this country that doesn't have any product of MAJAC, either from the senior reporters level to the editorial level. We've seen even in this country media houses that are entirely run, or at least the senior management of that media house, it's composed of MAJAC trainees, MAJAC products. I think this is a manifestation that the impact of MAJAC is being felt.
The project caters for 16 participants from civil society to be trained on communication over a period of 6 months. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
MAJAC announces a $3.7 billion project to strengthen communication activities in civil society organizations. Now, the UN talks on Libya aimed at ending the country's 8-year civil war have been adjourned. The adjournment comes without the appointment of a transitional government due to lack of consensus on who will lead the process. The meeting in Tunisia aimed to create a temporary government to prepare Libya for elections. More in this report.
Stephanie Williams declared that the face-to-face dialogue in Tunis was successful because it gathered Libyan stakeholders and decision-makers from all regions, parties and political affiliations.
75 Libyan patriots came to this meeting. They stayed. They discussed, intensive discussions. As you can see, we just finished and it's almost 11:30 at night. And they achieved. And indeed, a lot was achieved. Consensus on a roadmap towards elections with a clear date of the 24th of December, 2021, which is Libya's Independence Day, as you know. And it's a very important symbolic day for Libyans, and it will mark their full restoration of their sovereignty and their ability to democratically elect their own leaders.
Former Tunisian Foreign Minister Mounji Hamdi is one of the leading experts on Libya. He says Libyans agreed on a number of important matters, particularly on the scope, duties and powers of the Presidential Council, which will be made up of 3 members, a president and 2 deputy presidents. The forum attendees also reached an agreement on the duties and powers of the government and the head of government.
At the beginning of the week, the dialogue went rather very smoothly and very well. Unfortunately, at the end of the week, there was a deadlock in terms of the composition of the Presidential Council and the government. They couldn't agree on the mechanisms to select the Presidential Council and the government.
Libyan observers assert that tensions erupted when the delegations reached a deadlock when they came to selecting the names of their future representatives.
The
Libyan Joint Military Committee talks were successful in Geneva and Judams because Libyan rivals concluded an agreement between the 5+5 or the group of 10 as described by the UN envoy. The talks in Tunis were unsuccessful in designating the personalities who will lead the Presidential Council and the government. These important negotiations will be made online. Libyans have great expectations.
Tunisians are hopeful that Libya will no longer be dominated by armed groups, driven by local conflicts and divided between 2 bitterly opposed administrations. Experts in Libyan affairs assert that the UN-sponsored dialogue in Tunis was a historic event and a missed opportunity for Libyan stakeholders who could have made more political concessions after several years of instability in their North African country.
Talks on Libya's transitional government have been adjourned due to lack of consensus on who will lead the process. And from that report, the Gambia Ports Authority resumed ferry service operation on Saturday after nearly a month of shutdown due to problems with old landing bridges. 2 new landing bridges have been installed at the Banjul and Barra terminals by the Dutch company Diamond Shipyards. According to the authority, the landers are to improve safe and reliable ferry service between Banjul and Barra, a 7-mile waterway used by thousands of people every day. The installation of the new landing bridges meant that all three ferries had to stop operations. This created a travel chaos for thousands of people who had no choice but to use small wooden boats. And of course, the replacement of the 43-year-old landers comes with a 20% increase in fares from $25 to $30. Some travelers said they are not happy with the fare increment. From that, a record skipper in the Gambia Armed Forces is the latest victim to testify at the Truth Commission over the alleged brutality of the country's feared National Intelligence Agency. Abdukarim Jah was arrested and detained in connection with a failed coup plot in 2006. Asatu Tambandur files in this report.
In 2007, Captain Abdukarim Jah was sentenced to 25 years in jail after a military court convicted him of offense related to a March 2006 failed attempted coup. He was released in 2015 by a presidential pardon, making the 21st anniversary of the coup that brought Yahya Jammeh to power in 1994. Jah, a director of records at the Gambia Armed Forces, on Wednesday appeared before the country's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. He testified on account of brutally meted on him by the National Intelligence Agency for his role in the former Chief Konando Cham-led coup attempt.
That they were sent by Langtombon Tamba.
Langtombon Tamba Molen Ebal,
who was the second in command after Ndur Cham. I asked them for what reason? They say they were sent to come and collect me. Then my wives, two of them, they got up in the night with all the kids. It was a complete confused situation. Then I told them that soldiers came and they said they were sent by Langton Tamba to come and collect me.
At this point, did they tell you the reason why you were being arrested?
No,
ma.
Jah told the commission that he was drove straight to Mile 2, the Gambia Central Prison, and locked up overnight. He said the next morning he was visited at the prison by members of Yahya Jammeh's death squad, the Junglers, when one of them by the name Malik Jatta attempted hitting him on his head.
There's a table with a chair and you always have an officer who man the chair. They have a register there. Now my name was entered that I was out, going out. But before they start writing, there were these junglers, black, who came in.
Can you tell this commission how many of them you saw that day?
Yeah, 4 in number, the driver plus 3 others.
Can you further explain to the commission how they were dressed?
They were wearing this black all over. That was the first time after being in the army for a long time. That was the first time I saw those black uniforms, that we, Gambia Army, wear that black uniform. Then he was so drunk that he could not even barely stand. Then he just pulled his pistol from the pistol rack. Then he held the pistol from the muzzle and then he wanted to hit me with the butt. Then Ismaila hit his hand. Then when the pistol was dropping down, the edge of the butt scratched my head, a small scratch.
Captain Jah was taken to the headquarters of the National Intelligence Agency for interrogations by a panel of state agents, the police and military personnel. He said he made it clear to the panel, which included the former Interior Minister Usman Sonko and the former Army Chief Lantombang Tamba, that he has nothing to do with the coup. However, Jah said he did had the former Army Chief Ndur Cham saying that he must overthrow the government, but he could not say if he was serious about it. Jah was reinstated in the Gambia Army in April 2017 after a new government was installed. Reporting for African News, I am Aissatou Tambandour.
And from that report, we will now go with a short commercial break and continue with the rest of our stories. Stay tuned. From that short commercial break, we will take a look at the rest of our stories. A team of experts in Uganda are meeting to put forward ways to keep regional borders open amid the pandemic. Although the pandemic has affected the lives and livelihoods of many, Ugandan experts say there are lots of benefits when its regional borders are open for free movement of people. Details of that in this report.
This team of experts is discussing ways to keep regional borders open. They say even during a pandemic, the benefits outweigh the risks.
We would like the citizens of IGAD member states to move for reasons of trade, to move for reasons of access to education, to move for reasons of safety, that they know they can always choose their place of residence and abode.
The borders run between Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, Somalia, Uganda, Djibouti, and South Sudan. The IGAD Regional Protocol on Free Movement of Persons spells out the right of entry without visas, movement of workers, and right of residence. Experts believe opening borders will help people find a safe haven and also begin a new life in a country of their choice. But the region is still facing many challenges such as famine, drought, locusts, and insecurity, and of course, COVID-19. Since the outbreak of coronavirus earlier this year, many countries have been under lockdown and are only now beginning to reopen their borders.
COVID has been here with us for over now 8 months, and we as the IGAD region, we have been also affected. We actually contribute almost up to 10% of the burden in the African continent.
To help reduce the virus from spreading, they say anyone traveling across borders will need a COVID-19 negative certificate. Member states are also being helped by the European Union to fight COVID-19.
In our support, we are supplying them with emergency medical supplies. We are also giving them a mobile ambulance. We are giving them field vehicles. We are giving them standard ambulances, but we are also giving them, each member state is receiving one ambulance which has an ICU setup.
And even with the pandemic, these experts still hope to hit their 2023 target of achieving regional economic integration and development.
Ugandan experts suggest for the reopening of its borders amid coronavirus concerns. Now, heading to Nigeria, labor unionists have threatened fresh protests if the government failed to reduce recently increased fuel prices. The recent marginal increase on the price of petrol to around 45% has brought the unions back on the streets to strike over the pain the increment has caused. Shortly after the union's consultation meeting on what next to do, the Nigerian Minister for Petroleum, during a press briefing, explains the reasons behind the increment.
It's been barely 2 months since the labor unions in the country shelved a planned strike action over a hike in electricity tariff and petrol pump price. But with the recent marginal increase in the price of petrol to around 45 cents, the unions are back on the road again. For the same reason, a statement from the leadership of the main labor union, Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC), says, quote, "The recent increase in the pump price of the premium motor spirit PMS has only exacerbated the current level of pain and anguish in the country. We condemn the recent price increase and call for its reversal with immediate effect." End of quote. The union says it was consulting with its members to decide the next line of action. But shortly after that statement from the union, the Minister of State for Petroleum called a media briefing to give reasons for the price hike and further put forward the government's position.
What we have said over and over again as a government is that government is no longer in the business of fixing pump price. That is the meaning of deregulation and stepping back from subsidy. Yes, we are very aware that this will result in some increase, but why do we have to do this? Because it is clearly impossible for government to continue to subsidize. The money is not there now. If government were to continue with subsidy, it means, for example, at some point that we may not even have money after subsidizing petrol, to pay salaries.
The government and labor unions have been engaged in a long-drawn petrol subsidy battle. While the labor unions want the subsidy to remain, the government says it cannot afford it and eventually removed it in June this year. Manufacturers in the country have also backed the government's action.
We know that government can no longer maintain its refineries in operation and therefore will continue to depend on import of petroleum products. We want a situation where other private operators are encouraged to invest in the sector, to invest in refining and distribution, so that ultimately the supply will stabilize. And we are sure when that happens, the price will come down. We have seen that in all areas where deregulation has taken place.
But the labor unions are not seeing things from that perspective. They say the action will further complicate the hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and rising inflation.
This particular issue has been on the table for more than 3 decades, and that the arguments have not changed. Whether it's in the name of full deregulation or it's in the name of subsidy removal, what is obvious is that it's fuel price hike. And these have further eroded the gains of the 30,000 minimum wage because it has spiral effects.
Talks are still going on between both sides to resolve the issue, but it's not looking like any side is willing to shift ground, at least not for now.
And from that report, the spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary, Stephen Dujarric, has urged humanitarian agencies to continue calling for the protection of civilians in Tigray and of the respect for international humanitarian law. More than 25,000 children, women and men have fled Ethiopia into Sudan in search for safety due to ongoing clashes between the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray regional forces. Amadou Kante files in this report.
The United Nations Refugee Agency and other humanitarian organizations are supporting the Sudanese government in response to the growing crisis, as the number of new arrivals are far outspacing the capacity on the ground. The spokesman for the UN Secretary General, Stephen Dujarric, said there's a need to ensure that aid continues to reach areas affected by the conflict. He said efforts to provide support for victims is becoming more difficult as roads in the Tigray region remain blocked, putting millions at risk for food insecurity and disease.
That they and their partners continue to call for the protection of civilians in Tigray, respect for international humanitarian law, and ways to assess needs and ensure that aid continues to reach areas affected by the conflict. Roads to the Tigray region remain blocked, and our partners warn that supplies will soon be exhausted, putting millions at risk of food insecurity and disease.
Stephen Dujarric also raises concern about the risk for the spread of COVID-19 due to the lack of communication and health facilities.
It's also concerned about the movements of people and the risk this entails for the spread of COVID-19. Since the beginning of the conflict, all systems of surveillance have broken down with lack of communications and access to health facilities.
According to reports, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed indicated that the military operation launched in response to the reported occupation of a government military base by Tigrayan forces nearly 2 weeks ago would continue. Abiy said the military campaign is now in its final phase. Meanwhile, the local leader of Ethiopia's Tigray region said on Tuesday that the battle was still ongoing around the southern town of Amalata, which federal troops said they seized the previous day. Reporting for Africa News, I am Amadou Kante.
And that was all in the world today with me, Sana Tunkara. Gambia 24 is up next with Mariama Cham at 19:30 GMT. Until then, good evening.